record it. Okay, so now it looks like we're actually going. Okay, so foot zoning for depression and anxiety. This is sort of a recap of the presentation I did at that Utah Foot Zone conference. And unfortunately, I haven't been able to get my audio clips to run. So a little bit of the sparkle and pizzazz that was there will not be here. And that's pretty sad, actually. But we'll press on anyway. Here we go. It might be kind of small if you're looking at that on your phone.
It looks good.
4,000 years of medicine. This little meme cracks me up like every time I see it, because we all know someone who fits into one of those categories, right? And it is pretty funny how it wraps all the way back around. We're starting off, it's all about plants, roots, herbs. It gets outplaced as the centuries scroll on until now. Back in 2000, we've come around full circle. Oh no, drugs are poison. Here, eat this root, right? It cracks me up because I was kind of living in this spot right here. I wonder if my pointer will work. Ah, no. There we go. This spot down here where we are afraid of Western medicine. That's where I spent a whole lot of my life. And when we start off this presentation, I just wanted to share a little bit with you about my background and where I'm coming from. I love The Greatest Showman, so you just have to pretend that soundtrack's playing. This is me. It's kind of an interesting story, maybe a little bit unusual, and you'll see why. So 20 years ago, when I was almost 16, I had a really kind of a sudden nervous breakdown. It looked like a complete psychotic break, and it seemed like it was out of the blue. In hindsight, we could see how my health was kind of declining. This picture was taken a couple weeks before my big crash. I don't know if you can see in my face, I just do not look well. I didn't feel well. And it wasn't pretty a couple weeks later when I had this sudden crash. I really, I went down hard. I couldn't sleep. I wouldn't eat. I didn't recognize my parents or anybody else. I thought they were out to get me. It was very scary, especially for my parents. And the doctors didn't have any answers. They took me to the emergency room. I was there for several days trying to get fluids and basically just sort of sedate me and trying to do tests and figure out what was going on. Had someone slipped me drugs? Like, they just really didn't know what was happening. A couple weeks later, it was like a light switch went off in my head and I was back to normal. But my mom, of course, wanted to know what had happened. And then over the next couple months, I would kind of flip in and out from reality to kind of this psychotic, weird place. And eventually we found answers, but we had to look long and hard. I say we, but it was my parents, especially my mom, really trying to find answers. And every medical doctor she took me to had a different diagnosis, had a different heavy medication they wanted to try, but none of them were confident it would work, and none of them knew it was really wrong. So my mom kept looking, and eventually we found a naturopathic doctor who worked in a clinic with a medical doctor, and they found answers. We ran tests, and then the naturopathic doctor could prescribe what I needed to heal that part of my brain that was malfunctioning and my whole endocrine system that had crashed. So that was somewhat miraculous for me. It was a tremendous journey. I felt better immediately after they figured out what was wrong. And by that time we got around to the next Christmas, a year after my break, I was completely healthy. I was healthier than I'd ever been. I don't know if you can see it in my face there, but like there was just no comparison to how I felt. So for a 16, 17-year-old girl going through that, you can imagine my takeaway was pretty heavy in the like, wow, Western medicine doesn't know what they're doing. But naturopathic stuff does. Alternative medicine is where it's at. That's how I got better, and that's what I knew. So I was very anti-Western for most of my life. Very holistic. Um, and also with this pretty deep-seated fear of medication, because it turns out really any of the medications that had been prescribed probably potentially would have damaged me, maybe irreparably, possibly even killed me because of the way my endocrine system had completely crashed. So that was scary. Not everybody's situation is that scary, so it took a little while for me to kind of come around and recognize the beauty that there is in Western medicine. Um, what does this have to do with foot zoning, right? This is just my background. I think it's important that you understand just kind of the holistic perspective that I have now, because a couple years ago, I had another whole system failure kind of crash after my 6th child was born. And it's been a long healing journey. It really opened me up to learning a lot of new things. I had already picked up foot zoning by then, thank goodness, and that was a really valuable tool, but I learned to be open to what traditional medicine has to offer. The world of psychology is incredible. They have so many valuable tools. And psychiatry has some that can be useful for some situations as well. So that's where I'm at. As we get into the subject, journeying towards optimal health, I think the more open you are, the better. So let's get into it. First, friends of mine, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a person with a lot of experience in this area, and I love to share what I've learned. But I'm not a doctor, and if you need one, or if someone you love needs one, I recommend they go find one. This was the original course description, and there's no way to fit that in a 45-minute presentation. I'm hoping this will be even shorter because we're not going to take time to like work on it together like we did in the class. But I had to cut that, and we're just going to give special attention to this part of the brain that I really, really love, and I'm excited to share with you. It's super. So here we go. You just have to imagine the soundtrack. I'd sing it for you, but that'd be kind of dorky. We're gonna put some of the showman in your brain. Yes, you are. And I will explain why that makes sense, because it does. But first, we need to talk a little bit more about the brain and some of the people who have taught us a little more about it. This is Dr. Helen Mayberg. She's amazing. I love her. In 1999, she published a study where she identified what she called the ringleader in the brain, as far as mood control goes. Let me talk a little bit about that study because it was kind of a landmark thing she discovered. She was looked at hundreds and thousands of brain scans. Her goal was to identify what's going on in a depressed brain that isn't going on or isn't working the same way as a brain that's not depressed. So she compared these different slides: depressed, right, versus not depressed, right? Every slide was completely different. Every person is totally unique. It was a challenge, but eventually she found some common ground, and it's pretty remarkable. There it is. So amongst everything that was vastly different between depressed brains and not depressed brains, that part right there in the circle is something that held through across the board. So this part of the brain is overactive in patients that are depressed. And it's relatively cool in patients that are not depressed. as they went on to study it further, this part of the brain will light up in brains that are not depressed when they look at things that make them sad. But if they're not struggling with depression or anxiety and having difficulties there, that part of the brain will cool off again pretty quickly. Whereas in people who are depressed, it stays hot. It does not cool off as easily. So let's take a closer look at that part of the brain. Let me see. Oh yes, this slide. This is fun. Well, I think it's fun. In reading up on this and digging around, doing more research about her, found some really great quotes. She said that this part of the brain called Area 25 is the ringleader in the circuits that regulate mood. And when I read it, I heard it's the ringmaster in the circus in your head. And that's where we get my tie into Greatest Showman. Let's take a look at what is the difference between a ringleader and a ringmaster. I think this is interesting. So a ringleader is a person who initiates or leads illicit or illegal activity, like a ringleader in a gang, right? And a ringmaster is a person directing a circus performance. Now, there is so much going on in the brain that I think it kind of is like a circus. There's people coming on stage and off stage. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of opportunities for things to trip up and get tied up, but it's beautiful. And it's an amazing performance going on inside our heads. We definitely want to have a ringmaster and not a ringleader, because when Area 25 malfunctions, it can be pretty ugly. Let's take a look at where it is in the brain. It's right here. Brodmann was a neuroscientist in the early 1900s. He mapped out the brain based on the cellular structure. And he was convinced that different parts of the brain were tied to different functions. But of course, back in the early 1900s, they didn't know. Well, now we know, and it's fun to find out. So Area 25, right there, smack in the middle, both sides of the brain, have this special little spot here. Let's talk about what it does. And this is something everyone can relate to. I'm sure at some point you've had a really nasty flu and it doesn't feel good. Think of how you feel in your body when you have the flu. That feeling like you just can't move. You just want to lay down. You can't get out of bed. If you do have to get up, you discover that you actually can, but it just feels miserable. It is not a very happy feeling when you have the flu. A really bad one will leave you feeling edgy and cranky and miserable, and just everybody feels it a little differently, but we all know that feeling, that awful I am not well feeling, happens because Area 25 is inflamed. When Area 25 is inflamed, it tells your body to shut down, to just take time off, lay down, and it serves a purpose because when you have the flu, you need to fight off the virus, and your immune system needs you to rest. You'll get better faster if you do that, right? So it's serving a valuable purpose, but we don't want to stay there very long. We want to get better, and as your body fights off that flu, you're up and running again. That feeling of, oh, I cannot get out of bed goes away. Area 25 calms down and it's not inflamed anymore. Yay, and then you feel better. That is the common denominator. So it's kind of important to understand that people who are struggling with depression feel like they've got the worst flu of their life, basically. You get all the glories of a miserable flu without having a virus to fight off and conquer, so you can feel better. And that's not a very pleasant place to be. So that part that's red, we need that to cool down. And psychologists, therapists, counselors, psychiatrists, they will recommend 20 different things that can help you feel better, that can help you get over depression. And really, Those are all things that have been shown to reduce inflammation in Area 25. That's kind of the name of the game, really, but it's complicated. There are a lot of things that can affect it in the body, so that's why that list is 20 things long. Exercising and meditating and eating better and getting more sleep and learning different ways to handle stress or processing traumatic things that have happened earlier. All of these things can affect the body and have a direct impact on Area 25. So let's take a look at where it is in the mind. And this, I think, is fascinating and highly relevant. So if you can see my little pointer there, Area 25 is sitting right in between the frontal cortex and the midbrain. So most of the things in this slide, the hypothalamus, pituitary, amygdala, all of those things, the thalamus and the hippocampus, midbrain. These are the feeling centers. This is the hormone endocrine system headquarters, and it has a direct impact on how you feel. Feelings and hormones go together really, really, really tightly. Midbrain, you do not have a lot of conscious control over that. So good luck when there's issues, right? No, just kidding. The frontal cortex, you do. That's where your rational thought is coming from. And Area 25 is sitting right in between them. It is kind of optimal placement for regulating between those things. The conscious part of the brain that you can control and the subconscious that you can't. And let's take a look at what it looks like. The little energy pathways sending stuff all through. You can kind of see Area 25 is right there in the middle of it. If you have a train wreck going on in Area 25, it's going to impact a lot of other things in the brain. You want part of the brain being able to send messages from the pituitary to the pineal to the amygdala. It's kind of almost like a mailroom where it's not generating a lot of messages, but it's sending them everywhere. Going back to Dr. Mayberg really quick, I thought this was fascinating too. She did all this research on Area 25 and hypothesized, of course, that in patients where they were severely depressed and it was unresponsive to treatment, they had something going on in Area 25 where it was malfunctioning and it just would not calm down. So she, in 2005, she was able to work with some neurosurgeons, some other really cool people, and in patients where they were totally unresponsive to treatment, they'd been working at it for years and in some cases decades, and were not able to get over depression. They tried this deep brain stimulation. It had been used for people with different sort of neuropathy disorders. It had never been done in this way, never to attempt to treat depression. Because again, before her research, we didn't really know specifically where in the brain depression might be happening. So they stuck this electrode way down into the middle of the brain, sitting right on Area 25, and would, a lot like a pacemaker, send little electric impulses into the middle of the brain. They have a little battery pack down there by your collarbone, wires going all the way up around the skull and down into the brain. So the first time they did it, it was awfully brave. They didn't actually know if it was going to work. Fantastic quote from her saying, "For all we knew, we were going to activate the circuits and actually make people feel worse." I have no idea. But fortunately, it did work. You had people that were profoundly suffering, and this helped. All of a sudden now they could smile, they could feel happy again, have a normal range of emotion instead of always being stuck in miserable. They are still doing these procedures for people who have no other options, and it is still proving effective, but it doesn't have 100% success rate. So that's too bad. And even today, she will tell you, to be brutally honest, we have no idea how this works. They just know. For some people, it works extremely well. Area 25 really does seem to be a main player in people who have depression. So when I was learning about this, I kind of thought to myself, well, what if we could just zone it? What if we could put it into our foot zoning and get the kind of results that they get with deep brain stimulation? And this is what I have noticed. I have used it in foot zoning for mental health in myself and also in my clients, especially in the context of having been foot zoned regularly. If you just use this pressure point by itself, it's not going to work as well as when you incorporate it into an entire foot zone. But in that context, it can help tremendously for immediate relief. It can be a beautiful piece of the puzzle as you're pursuing long-term healing. And then as you get someone stable, it can help with the continued maintenance. So that's happy. It's wonderful. I love it. Let's look at where we would zone it on the foot. I kind of love that graphic of the deep brain stimulator because to me, that's a little bit what we're doing when we're foot zoning. We're pushing these pressure points on the feet and sending impulses that will connect up to the brain and help everything work better. So here's something that you might already be familiar with as a foot zoner. I'm sure you're zoning the pituitary gland and the pineal gland and that limbic system. Area 25 is going to sit right there above the pituitary gland, and it's going to feel different. I don't know that I can speak for every foot zoner and for every foot that needs to get zoned, but for me, when I found it, like the pituitary gland has a specific area in the toe, and when it has problems, it's going to be crunchy, it's going to feel hard, almost like a little knot in the muscle there. Area 25 is different. It should feel open and like a cave, and when it's inflamed, it kind of has a bigger imprint. It might even feel hot on the foot. When it's working well and regulating itself well, it has a much smaller and it feels cool to the touch. Smaller is the only way I can think of to describe it, but it's easier to just feel it. There's a little bit closer. Again, trying to keep in mind that map of the brain and where it is on the foot. I found it's useful also to zone it in the thumb. You can teach your clients how to rub that part of their thumb really easily. It's super easy to reach it with your index finger. So if they're ever in situations where their anxiety is starting to spike or where they've had some hard news and they're feeling like, well, they're going to crash again into a depressive mindset, they can rub that pressure point and it might help to pull out of it. I don't want to make any, outstanding claims here, but I'm just telling you, like, from my experience, I have noticed when I remember to do that, it really does help my feelings to regulate faster and better instead of kind of going off the cliff into yucky feeling land. So there's what it would look like on the left foot. It's the same, the mirror image. Area 25 is a little bit closer to the rest of the toes. And I guess that's all there is to kind of teach you about how to zone it. I wish we were in person and we could practice together, because that's pretty fun. In person last week, we had a lot of really great questions as people practiced. A lot of people noticed that it would turn bright red There's a lot of emotion in that signal, and so often the pressure points that connect to it will kind of go, they'll kind of turn red. So I had a lot of content that didn't make it into this presentation, so I plan to do another one, hopefully in the near future, probably this weekend, crossing fingers. Foot zoning, mental health, there's a lot of other things that go on there. A lot of other tools I found, and a lot of other kind of tricks, just being able to maintain it, being able to get to a place where you feel better, and then to stay there. That can be a challenge for people who have mental health struggles. I did want to throw out here a few of my favorite things. It's really helpful to support the body in this journey. It's a big part of mental illness. So this is my favorite herbalist. She has some wonderful tools, and she does very highly individualized treatments for people. She does fantastic energy work. So she's really, really valuable. Essential oils are awesome. Essential oil accessories, so you can have the oil that you need, kind of wear it on you in a locket or on a bracelet. That has been a big help to kind of go through all those different transitions. And these are some excellent books. I love books. I love to read about this. I love to be empowered to work on my own issues myself. And I've noticed that when I'm working with a therapist, boy, we cover a lot more ground when I have resources that I'm working through my own. So anything by David Burns, he's amazing. I love his stuff. He's pretty much devoted his life to learning how to heal mental health stuff and to make it faster. The Power of Now is an amazing book also. For people who are ready for it, and you'll know. If you pick this book up, you read the first couple pages and you don't know what he's talking about, then you're probably not the right book for you. But if you are, that can really help, because one of the big components of depression, as far as I've been able to figure it out, it's almost like an addiction to unhealthy thoughts. And we have to recognize that we are actually not our thoughts. We are affected by them, but we can control them and we can use them as a tool. We don't have to be steamrolled by it. So The Power of Now was helpful for me in making that connection and understanding that concept. Really amazing book. 8 Keys to Safe Trauma Recovery. A lot of people dealing with depression or anxiety, especially anxiety, have some trauma that's happened. Maybe big, maybe minor, like just a move. That can be traumatic. People can find themselves all of a sudden experiencing anxiety that they had never had before. And this book is really helpful for kind of teaching people how to listen to their body, how to know what they need to recover. It's a beautiful book. And then for a lot of women too, depression and stuff that needs sexual healing, they kind of go together. I don't know how to say that any other way, but if you have significant trauma there, it's going to affect your mental health. So resources to help heal that can be really valuable. And I think foot owners should be aware of these tools. If it ever comes up, they know there's something they can recommend. So going back to where we started, keep an open mind. 2018 AD, figuring out how to zone Area 25 does not displace anything else that you already know and love. So keep it. Don't toss out anything else just because we're understanding more pieces of the puzzle. We need all the pieces to understand this puzzle that is mental health. So I think the whole picture is the greatest show. The more we understand, the better off we are. So ultimately, I think everyone can achieve optimal mental health given the right tools and the right amount of time and patience. So that's my hope for everybody. And that's the end of my little presentation. Ta-da!
Elisa, that was wonderful. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Do you have any questions?
I do.
Oh, good. Bring
You
it.
mentioned that Area 25 should feel open and not hot. Can you keep describing it to me? Give me some more description so that I know what to feel for.
Okay. So maybe I can ask you really quick. When you're zoning in the brain, what kinds of things do you feel in that area?
I've got one client that it always feels lumpy.
Lumpy. So all of the stuff in there feels like.
And I've got another client that tends to feel crunchy.
Okay.
But they definitely stand out. Yeah, they're standouts.
Okay. So and I'll just kind of be honest, in people that aren't struggling with a mental health issue, when you go to look for Area 25, it might be hard to find.
That's good.
Yeah, if there's nothing going on there, then there's no need to like really dig into it and find it any more than anywhere else in the brain, right? We want to zone everything, but if it's cooled off and it's nice and small, it's not going to probably jump out at you. But in clients who may be struggling with things like bipolar, panic attacks, anxiety, significant depression,
those are very common.
then Area 25 will be kind of a red flag there. It's going to want attention because for a lot of them, it just can't cool down. And there's a reason for that, right? When you've got a flu, Area 25 gets inflamed like to serve a purpose because there's a problem. So when someone's dealing with depression, their brain is sending out that message, there's a problem here. And so there's going to be something going on elsewhere in your foot zone for sure. It's really complicated the way it's all connected. So when I zone this, sorry, super long answer to your super short question.
This is good.
Yeah, when I zone it, I try and connect it to everything. Do you remember this slide? Can you see that one?
Not yet.
Let me try and find it. Back. Almost. Yeah, this one. Okay, we're basically trying to do this on the foot. So you find Area 25. It should be right above the pituitary gland, which is down here.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi, Jamie.
So the pituitary gland is actually the opposite. And the pineal should be by the pineal gland.
We're looking at the right hemisphere.
So the pituitary gland is next to the brainstem in the back.
Here's the pituitary gland. Ta-da!
That's the pineal gland.
What? Really?
Yeah.
Why is my picture wrong? Google.
So when Steph did those pictures, you know, the original ones for foot zoning, she accidentally swapped the name.
Really? This one here?
So Jamie, are you saying the pituitary gland is marked and it should be the pineal gland? Is that what you said?
Yeah. So not on this picture. Let's see. I'm pretty sure on the the slide that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is backwards.
So I'm looking at the right foot. And tell me what's incorrect here.
So the pineal gland is actually the green one, and the pituitary gland is actually the red one.
But this cross section is correct, right?
I think it's the opposite.
Because
I don't want to go pull out my books.
no, I know. I don't want to get it wrong. But in looking at all my cross sections on Google and stuff, that's where they show it as well. Yeah, no, it's in the front.
The pituitary gland?
Oh yeah, and it looks kind of like that hanging sac, and it hangs right there behind your eyes, basically.
Yeah. And the pineal gland is in the back?
I think so. Let me go. Yeah, the pineal gland is pretty small, and it sits right up above the brainstem.
Oh, so I was thinking, okay, so I knew that the pineal gland was higher. That's why I was thinking it was up towards the front of the head.
Yeah, the pineal gland is a little higher than the pituitary gland.
Okay.
But that's
Okay.
basically correct.
Okay.
My little
So
picture.
the screen that I'm looking at, I'm happy with. Is this correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
this is right.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
That the pituitary gland should be right there. And area 25, you'll find it right above.
Right above.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right above the pituitary.
So from the center of the toe to find area 25, you go directly towards the little toes and a little tiny bit up.
Do you do it in a certain way?
There is an order that I have found that I like to zone it. I'll do the hypothalamus first, and then I'll go over to the pituitary gland, and then area 25. And I just trace between all these signals. So I'll connect pituitary to area 25, and then I'll connect area 25 back to the pituitary. So going back and forth between them, and then do pituitary to the pineal gland, and back and forth between them, and then to the hypothalamus, and back and forth between those. And then also area 25, if you connect that up through the frontal cortex also, that's tremendously helpful for addictions. And also up through that frontal cortex, that's where your pleasure pathways are. So for people who are depressed, they're not feeling much through there. They're not feeling very happy. I know when I'm in that dark place, it's like there are no happy feelings anywhere in the entire world for any reason. You can play that Greatest Showman soundtrack all day long and it won't even make me crack a smile because I just can't feel it. It's like the access is closed off. So when you zone, connecting area 25 through to those pleasure pathways will kind of open it up and let the sun shine in again. It's wonderful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Did I understand? So you're zoning area 25 and you connect it to each of those. Okay.
Yes, especially if I find a problem. And you just kind of go through it as quickly as you can with any client, with all your clients. But for someone that you know is struggling in this department, then you want to give it a lot of attention and make sure you connect everything. Sometimes I find I need to connect it, area 25, to the pituitary gland, and then also zone the thyroid at the same time. Because the thyroid is doing a lot of stuff in the endocrine department, right? Oh, yeah. There's some, oh my goodness, what did Tara J find? Like 60 different hormones that go through the thyroid. And often in other places of the body too, like when I'm zoning, if I find an issue in the pancreas, sometimes I need to go up to area 25 and connect them. I'm not sure why, but it just seems to be kind of the ringleader, like she said. If there's problems going on, it's and I find that things shift and clear so much faster as I'm foot zoning when I incorporate it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm excited to try this.
Yeah, it's fun to play with. And I'm interested to hear feedback. If you use it, if your clients use it, if they can tell a difference. I know my clients with bipolar loved this so much. They would come and see me when they felt like they were on the verge of kind of an upswing.
Really?
Uh-huh. Area 25, oh, I forgot to mention it. It's like the equalizer. It's the stabilizer. When you get really excited, it's the part of the brain that tells you to calm down. And when you get really sad, it's the part of the brain that tells you, okay, we've had our cry. We can release it, let it go, and get back to a normal place.
That sounds perfect for bipolar.
Yes, it is. It is like, I don't want to say it's the magic button for bipolar, but it kind of is. It really is the part of the brain that's malfunctioning with them, that doesn't rein them in when they go manic. Wow! It's like it's not even there.
Yeah.
And so when you zone it, you can bring it back online and kind of wake it up and say, hey, we need you.
So do you, when you're doing the signal, do you actually do like energy work with it and tell it what to do?
You can, if you feel like that's what it needs. Yeah, for sure. Sometimes I will be more asking it questions. Okay, what's going on? What do you need? Because there's almost always a reason. So sometimes there's something that needs to clear. Sometimes there's an oil that it needs to kind of balance out and connect with everything else. I find mental health stuff to be fairly complicated. Even though this can be a magic button for some things, there's other pieces to that puzzle that people need to work out, probably beyond just foot zoning. Even if you're a really, really good foot zoner, you're probably not also a doctorate level psychologist. And they have a lot of really valuable tools to offer and teach people in terms of thought control and in changing these patterns and the pathways that are really ingrained. You can zone it, but there's still some things they need to understand consciously. So I'm a little bit leery when people are hoping that a foot zone can take care of all their mental health problems. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so it can be hard though. You can't force someone to find other tools. But we are in a kind of a unique place where people are usually pretty open if they're coming to us. So they might be open to hearing recommendations for therapy or recommendations for books, things like that. They're usually in a more vulnerable place for us, so it's good to be aware of all these other tools that might be helpful and be able to recommend them in a way that goes over well. You know, we're not prescribing anything. We're not doctors.
Nope.
Foot zone therapists. We're not like psychotherapists, but the two are really connected, so it can be a really powerful tool.
Lisa, you mentioned essential oils. Do you have favorites that you like to use in the zone for depression and anxiety?
It depends on the person. You can muscle test that out and they will tell you. I do really like Heart Song from Butterfly Express. It's a beautiful blend. A lot of times they'll need blends that are more like Young Living's. Do they have one called Wake Up or Energy? Yeah, I think Young Living's is Energy. Butterflies is called Wake Up. doTERRA has a blend. Cheer is fantastic. Zoom is gonna kick me off in 2 minutes, just so you know.
Okay.
For if anybody has had a traumatic childhood, child abuse of any kind, there's a blend called Inner Child that's amazing from Young Living, and also one called Angel from Butterfly Express that does beautiful, beautiful healing stuff on old trauma, which is often stored in all this part of the brain. Pituitary, especially amygdala.
So if it's old trauma, do you find this is much more effective on adults than on children?
That's hard to say. It does feel different in adults versus children.
How's that?
with adults, there's like super long standing stuff. And with children, it's all more fresh.
Yeah.
It just needs to be kind of realigned and kind of back on track. It's like most everything in children, there's not as much long-standing baggage to dig through. So things usually change a lot faster. Oh, they're going to kick us off in less than a minute, guys. We can have questions on Facebook for sure, though.
Thank you so much, Elisa.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you so much. You've been great.
Thanks. Happy to help.
Go soak up some sunshine and beach for me.
Okay, well.
Great.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.